Hello and welcome to our webinar Speak Up, which was first presented at the LCEQ 2021 conference. I am Melinda Clifford. I am the coordinator for the elementary and secondary English language arts programs at the Ministry of Education, and I am accompanied by my wonderful colleague, Dawn.
I'm Dawn Uniat. I'm a teacher from the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, currently on a loan of service working with Melinda on the ELA team.
Thanks, Dawn. Talk is a fundamental prerequisite for democratic engagement. This quote is by Robin Alexander, who is well known for his research and writing on education policy, curriculum, and dialogic pedagogy. He reminds us that as educators, it's imperative that we help our students to find their own voices, to become articulate, critical, engaged, and active citizens. In his 2020 book on dialogic teaching, he highlights the skills of negotiation, deliberation, reasoning, listening, and talking as essential lifelong skills. Today, we explore how these empowering Oracy skills can promote not only civic engagement, but prepare our youth to participate in global dialogue as citizens of the world. So let's take a moment to look at the names in the word cloud on our screens. What do you think these people have in common? Well, each of these people share Oracy skills that have empowered them to voice their beliefs, concerns, ideas, and values. They've recognized social, environmental, educational, and economic injustices, and they use their voices to draw awareness to these issues in an effort to promote understanding and change. We're not proposing that all of our students become activists, but we do propose that they need the Oracy skills necessary to become active citizens. And it's not about writing and delivering speeches. It's about recognizing the issues, being able to construct an informed opinion, and harnessing the voice and the confidence to express it. So these people may also be familiar to some. They're young Canadians speaking up for what they believe in. Hayley Campbell, age 26, is from Y for Y Quebec, that's Youth for Youth, encouraging our youth to get involved in their communities. Larissa Crawford from Alberta speaks up for renewable energy and anti-racism. Faith Dickinson from Ontario speaks up about cuddles for cancer. Faye Johnston in Ontario is a spokesperson for the LGBTQ and inclusion community. Autumn Peltier is also from Ontario. She speaks up about clean water. Abhijit Singh Sachal from British Columbia speaks up about mental health. And Vishal Vijay is from Ontario and speaks up about poverty. Today, we want to talk about the inherent link between Oracy and citizenship and the imperative need now more than ever before to promote classroom talk. We'll begin with a brief look at the research that details the importance of Oracy as a key ingredient or key aspect of active citizenship, as well as our own research that highlights the struggles our own students are experiencing with talk. We'll take a moment to address some of the misconceptions about talk, and then we'll move on to look at some of the justifications for teaching talk and why it is so important now more than ever before. We'll look at the art of argument and strategies such as negotiating, deliberating, reasoning, and listening. Then we'll move on to the notion of voice and the importance of rich talk in the classroom. After that, we'll discuss how we can help our students find their own voices within our curriculum. And we'll finish with some examples of literature that teachers can use to promote awareness of issues that will hopefully spark discussion and inspiration in the classroom. And now over to you, Dawn.
You might be wondering what we mean when we use the word Oracy. It's not commonly used in North America, but it's not a new term either. Andrew Wilkinson and his colleagues at the School of Education at Birmingham University coined the term Oracy back in 1965. They were concerned that speaking and listening were not being given as much importance as reading and writing, and they felt that the term Oracy would elevate the status of talk. We've been following the work of Voice 21, a UK nonprofit that works to promote Oracy in schools. They define Oracy as the ability to articulate ideas, develop understanding, and engage with others through spoken language. PACT, the Provincial Advisory Council of Teachers of English, Subcommittee for Talk, concluded that Oracy enables us to navigate our own learning and our world through the skills and processes of talking and listening. Today we'll be using the terms talk and oracy interchangeably, and please note that listening is an important part of talk and oracy. So just how important is the notion of talk in terms of active citizenship? Let's take a look at some of the research. We tried to fit as much as we could into this short 2-minute clip. To supplement the research with our own data, the English Language Arts Programs team at the MEQ recently surveyed over 300 elementary and secondary English Language Arts teachers from across the province about the state of talk in our English schools, and we'd like to share some of the results with you. In our survey, when asked, to what extent do you feel your students' ability to talk is important in their development in the following area? Almost all teachers agreed that the ability to voice opinions and to participate in school and the wider community is important. That being said, more than 3/4 of the teachers who responded raised major concerns that students need significant support to speak in class. According to the survey, half or less than half of ELA students are comfortable clearly articulating their ideas, presenting to the class, participating in public speaking, justifying their ideas with arguments and opinions, choosing and using the appropriate register for effective communication, and listening actively and critically. Talk remains a challenge because even with an overwhelming consensus that our students require significant support to improve their talk skills, there are a number of common misconceptions we need to overcome. Misconceptions like talk being a naturally acquired skill that we do not need to teach, that a student whose mother tongue is English already knows how to communicate effectively, that reading and writing are more important than speaking, and that providing opportunities in class for students to speak is teaching them to talk. We often use strategies like think, pair, share, turn and talk, and lots of others, but they in themselves allow students to practice talking but do not teach them how to communicate. So we need to overcome these misconceptions. I'm going to pass it back to Melinda at this point.
Thanks, Dawn. So in this section, we're going to take a look at the various justifications for teaching talk, and then at why it's more important now than ever before. Noted author and educator Robin Alexander, whom we mentioned earlier, presents 8 points as crucial justifications for the teaching of talk in his brand new book, A Dialogic Teaching Companion. First of all, Alexander argues that talk is critical for developing thinking skills. Vygotsky saw talk as the foundation for higher level thinking, as well as an instrument for learning and an important factor in cognitive development. which brings us to learning, the second reason, which is both a cognitive and a social endeavor. We learn through interaction, and talk helps us to scaffold thinking. It allows us to build on our prior knowledge and experiences as well. Talk is essential for understanding. Students deepen their understanding of subjects through discussion. Talk allows them to take ownership of the content, the register, the concepts, and the vocabulary of each subject. And we need talk to communicate, to exchange and negotiate meaning, and to conduct everyday transactions with others. Talk also allows us to relate to other people. It helps us build and consolidate relationships. Alexander also links talk to acculturation, stating that it helps us engage with what we have in common with others in our communities and in our cultures. As we stated in the blurb for today's presentation, it's also vital for democratic engagement. We need to teach our youth how to argue, how to challenge and question, and how to make and evaluate cases, and to test the arguments and the rhetoric of those in power. We need talk for teaching so that teachers can listen and learn from their students. Talk allows teachers to understand how children think and question their learning. Through talk, we can assess their progress and their needs, design appropriate learning tasks, and provide them with the feedback that they need to support them. So while we're on the topic of teaching talk, there are a number of recent publications that seek to promote classroom talk. Gaunt and Stott's Transform Teaching and Learning Through Talk, the Oracy Imperative, is one such book, but what we'd like to focus on is that idea that now more than ever, equipping our students with Oracy skills really is imperative. In our opinion, talk has always been an integral part of learning, but why is talk important now more than ever? Well, Kate Starbird, in a recent article for The Conversation, put it nicely when she stated that the COVID-19 pandemic has spawned an infodemic, a vast and complicated mix of information, misinformation, and disinformation. We've all heard the rumors that the COVID virus was planned, that it was designed as a bioweapon, and that symptoms are caused by 5G wireless communications technology. According to a poll in the UK, a number of people accept the claim that the COVID pandemic was started deliberately to reduce the population. Thousands marched in anti-mask protests in Montreal and Quebec City as part of a COVID-19 denialist movement, waving QAnon flags or wearing Q t-shirts. We've witnessed and continue to observe the fragility of democracy both here and abroad. We are in what many have referred to as the age of post-truth, a political culture in which debate is framed largely by appeals to emotion. In such appeals to emotion, there's often a disconnect from facts and policy. The facts are ignored and personal opinion takes precedent in the justification for arguments. We've seen this repeatedly across the border over the past few years with a president who, while he was in office, according to Fact Check, publicly expressed 23,000 lies, 23,500 lies. And we continue to hear ongoing allegations of fake news, propaganda, doctored photographs, fake live streams, and more directly related to the war in Ukraine. Disinformation campaigns abound. Alternative facts and truth decay, a term coined by the Rand Corporation and made famous in an interview Obama did last November with the BBC, have become the uncomfortable norm. We have organizations that wield enormous influence, such as QAnon, fueling conspiracy theories to all those powerless to question and ignorant enough to follow. So how do we equip our youth with the power to question the difference between fact and fiction and to speak up? It's not an easy question to answer. Teachers today are faced with the enormous challenge of trying to uphold the values and ideals of education that focus on decency, reason, argument, and evidence, while being utterly flooded with derision in the form of fake news, myths, and lies that seek to subvert truth and manipulate the audience. They have an increased responsibility to ensure that students can distinguish truth and fiction, and that they question what they read, see, and hear. Spoken language is critical. Explicitly teaching students how to question, argue, reason, support their ideas with evidence, and clarify misunderstandings is paramount. And all of this is made even more of a challenge by COVID and the strains that has put on teaching. Over the past 2 years, much teaching has happened in a blended environment, both online and face-to-face. So discussions have often been hampered by face masks and social distancing. If COVID has done anything, it's highlighted the necessity for communication and the urgency for students to be able to talk together. To their enormous credit, many teachers quickly got used to using breakout rooms, synchronous and asynchronous conversations, Flipgrid, and a variety of other applications to promote speaking in an online environment. And speaking of online environments, digital media is everywhere, and it's the means by which many of us inform others and stay informed ourselves. It's also been described by Alexander as the main channel for conveying and distorting information for public consumption. If we consider for a moment the critical place of voice on social media, we may start to question the notion of free speech and the balance between free speech and being offensive. Essentially, much of it comes down to not only what we say, but also how we say it. Why? Because how we speak matters. Coleman, in his article, Citizenship and the Speaking Subject, makes a valid and important point. As soon as they open their mouths, citizens are exposed to forms of judgment which dismiss some utterances as vulgar or mere noise, while competence appears to be inscribed within the smooth tones of the well-spoken. In the context of democratic citizenship, this has significant ramifications for the likelihood of being taken seriously. But it can go the other way too, as expressed in this quote by Cicero. Wisdom without eloquence does little benefit, but eloquence without wisdom does much harm. So our students need to learn how to express themselves effectively and eloquently, but also how to recognize falsehoods and question the dominant rhetoric. So one approach to promote awareness and prompt students to question is through the art of argument. Unfortunately, argument often has a pejorative connotation when the understanding of arguing is a heuristic dialogue where the purpose is to humiliate and defeat the opponent at all costs. This disputational type of argument is not what we want to encourage in our classrooms, but there are 6 other types of argument, according to Douglas Walton, that we would like to take a moment to present. A quick note that Walton refers to the different types of argument as dialogues, as conversations between 2 or more parties. So the first one is persuasion, where there is a conflict of opinion and a need to persuade the other party and a desire to reach a resolution. The second type of argument is inquiry. So we're looking at the search for evidence to prove or to disprove a certain hypothesis. The third type of argument, discovery, searches for explanations, and it's a big part of science, trying to support a hypothesis, for example. Following that is negotiation, where we seek to make a deal to find a settlement that both parties can agree on. There's also information seeking, which is the gathering and transmission of knowledge and ideas. And finally, deliberation, when you have a choice of weighing the pros and the cons, and through consideration, you have to find the best course of action and decide what to do. Alexander, in his book on dialogic teaching, presents 8 repertoires for teaching talk. Among these 8 repertoires are argument and questioning as explicit skills that need to be taught. We can't assume that our students know how to do this naturally. So in his presentation of argument, he calls on the work of Resnitskaya and Wilkinson, who identify 4 criteria to promote and facilitate classroom argumentation. They encourage students to explore different perspectives, to be clear in their use of language and argument structure, to use reasons and evidence to support their stance, and to use logic to connect ideas and present an opinion. In a recent seminar Alexander gave on dialogic teaching, he presented these 4 criteria and shared the questioning prompts that he used to fuel the argument, which I want to share with you here today. Students may begin with something like, today our big question is this. To clarify meaning, we could ask questions like, is this what you mean? Or are you saying that this, or how does this relate to what someone else has said? To evaluate the facts, students might ask questions like, so how do we know this? Where does that information come from? Does it come from a reliable source? So what's interesting is the extent to which the repertoire of questioning blends with that of argument. So explicitly teaching our students how to question, what kinds of questions to ask, how to argue, and that argument doesn't have to have a negative connotation, but that there are different types of arguments which serve very different purposes, and it's extremely important that our students learn the skills inherent in each type and have multiple opportunities to practice. We'd like to finish this section with a quote from Alexander's book, which I have here, A Dialogic Teaching Companion. What we have witnessed in the public sphere in recent years is the ascendancy of the heuristic over the deliberative. This trend exposes the inadequacy of traditional models of civic education and the severity of the challenge for those educators who believe, following John Dewey, that democracy starts with a deliberative pedagogy. For, as Kakatani says, without commonly agreed upon facts, there can be no rational debate. Without truth, democracy is hobbled.
In this next section, we're going to look at voice and the rich talk classroom. What is voice? When he talks about voice, Alexander points out three different meanings: utterance, expression, and moral right. Please take a few minutes to think about the questions that you see on the screen. Alexander explains voice this way: utterance, the sounds that come out of our mouths, speaking, shouting, singing, laughing, etc. But it goes beyond this, and voice can also be an expression of our identities. For example, accents, how we speak, can say a lot about where we come from, the way we use language, different dialects, colloquialisms, and expression is also how we present and share our thoughts. And finally, voice as a moral right, the right to speak and the right to be heard. Indeed, in Canada, it's also a legal right, since one of our fundamental freedoms is the right to expression, as stated in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Some challenges arise, though, when we're looking at voice. The context of a dialogue raises questions about power. Whose voice matters? Whose voice is heard? Whose is not heard? Voices can be marred, muted, supported, or silenced based on issues such as inequality and equity, culture, ethnicity, wealth, gender, age, and class. In a classroom context, whose voice is heard and valued? In a whole class discussion, how involved is the teacher in steering the conversation or trying to achieve a particular end? Or is there an agenda? And of course, sometimes that's the way it needs to be, depending on the purpose and learning context. But what about students' voices? Do they count? Are they respected? Is the classroom set up as a risk-free environment where students feel comfortable taking chances and voicing their opinions without fear of ridicule? And are students voicing their own ideas or reiterating the teacher's ideas or someone else's? Do students also have the right to remain silent? Do we need to question our insistence on participation? And we can't forget about the challenges in our own classrooms, where we have students with learning difficulties, nonverbal communicators, and those with various speech, communication, and language needs. With all the challenges that teachers need to consider regarding voice, what could it look like in the classroom? In his work, Gilbert states that, according to Harwood, classrooms which focused on open discussion of issues and values generated positive outcomes in political interest and feelings of efficacy, confidence, and commitment to participation. Furthermore, inquiry-based, activity-oriented teaching is more effective in promoting participatory attitudes and skills than our expository, didactic teaching methods. With that in mind, we spoke to Diane Vetter from York University. Dr. Vetter talked to us about how she brought rich talk into the classroom and made the link between rich talk and active citizenship. She explained how important it is to go beyond the surface, not just talk about the what, but to go deeper and think about questions of how and why. Dr. Vetter also highlighted the need to have important, real things to talk about in class for student engagement and to help them make connections to their world. So I'll just show you a little bit of our interview with Dr. Vetter.
We were wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the link that you see between rich talk classrooms and active citizenship.
Well, I think it basically all comes down to something that James Britton said way back in 1970, and that is, talk is the sea upon which all else floats. And I think it's been paraphrased quite a lot in other research to say that, you know, reading and writing floats on a sea of talk. And I really think that's where things began for me. And what happened is that when I wanted students to really talk in rich ways in the classroom, I found that there was a lot of sort of trite conversation going on about topics that really didn't always catch their interest, that weren't necessarily relevant to their day-to-day lives, and that weren't really interesting. And I always tell a cute little story. Well, I think it's cute anyways, in a workshop about, show and tell. I mean, show and tell was something that we all did as teachers years ago. And I sort of liken the difference between a rich talk classroom and engaging in active citizenship is that if I went to a party and somebody said to me, oh, I see you have a new sweater, or I like your sweater. And I said, oh, thank you. I got it at Sears. It was 60% off. It came in 3 other colors, blue, red, and yellow, but I like the black one best. And so that's the one I decided to buy. Do you have any questions? And it's so bizarre. Like, nobody talks like that in real life. And yet that's exactly what happens in a lot of classroom talk. It's very surface. And so I really felt that the kids in my class needed to dig deeper. We needed to find more important things to talk about. And we needed to find things that were important to their lives. And so that's how we got really interested. And I've always been interested in social justice issues. And so we made that link between social justice issues, active citizenship, and talk curriculum. And it all just took off from there.
We spoke to Dr. Vetter for almost an hour, and she talked a lot about helping students find their voices. And some of the things she recommended: guest speakers, which can actually be quite convenient to set up in a virtual setting, as well as interviews, class newspapers, letters to members of the community, chat shows, news broadcasts. And Dr. Vetter explained how all of these can help students move beyond surface talk towards more critical oracy. And engaging in these kinds of authentic learning situations led her students to become more active citizens. And I'm going to pass it back to Melinda at this point.
Thanks, Dawn. So this section focuses on helping students find their voices. The notion of active citizenship is one of the broad areas of learning in the Quebec Education Program. The focus on citizenship and community life aims to enable students to take part in the democratic life of the classroom or the school and develop an attitude of openness to the world and respect for diversity. This broad area of learning, as well as the cross-curricular competencies, open up a host of interdisciplinary opportunities for exploration and study. A quick note in terms of the cross-curricular competencies that feature prominently include to use information, solve problems, exercise critical judgment, cooperate with others, communicate appropriately, but really they all tie in. So an excellent place to start is the English Language Arts classroom. The emphasis on talking to communicate and to learn figures prominently in both the elementary and secondary ELA programs, providing teachers with prime opportunities to explicitly teach the critical oracy skills that our students need for active civic engagement. The programs are centered in the connection between the learner's world and words, since language is both a means of communicating feelings, ideas, values, beliefs, and knowledge, as well as a medium that makes active participation in democratic life and a pluralistic society or culture possible. The focus on inquiry-based learning allows teachers lots of room to explore issues in the ELA classroom. We know we've presented you with a lot of information so far. We started with the notion of critical oracy as presented by Gilbert. Then we shared elements of Robin Alexander's dialogic teaching framework, which is rather reminiscent of accountable talk and approaches touted by Resnick in the US. We also presented Vetter's approach promoting a rich talk classroom. Each of these approaches to classroom talk has valuable attributes, and the common thread is that they are all in service of teaching our students how to become more effective and confident communicators. Communicators who listen actively and critically, question information, and who can negotiate, reason, and support their opinions. We thought that the image here that shows the U or the horseshoe setup was particularly appropriate, as the research shows that it's one of the most favorable setups in the classroom for promoting talk. So a couple of very important things to consider in the context of the classroom. The first of which is engagement. We need to allow our students to focus on issues that interest them and that they are passionate about. This leads naturally into exploration of the issues and an increased awareness and understanding. A rich talk classroom can help talk flourish and encourage students to dig deeper. Students need to question everything that they read, hear, and see. Once students have the information, and when they can consider different perspectives, they can adopt a position or a stance. To do this, they'll need to be able to negotiate their understanding and present and support their opinions. This process is reliant on the development and practice of oracy skills and self-confidence. So a classroom environment that supports students, that is risk-free and respectful, is key. We must give them a voice. If we want children to do as they are told, they'll never be able to think for themselves. If, however, we as educators can successfully help them put together the pieces of the puzzle, we'll provide our students with the power of advocacy, the ability to recognize injustices and to speak up for themselves and for others. And now over to you, Dawn.
All right, we'd like to finish up by looking at a few books that might provide some inspiration for the classroom. We put together a book list and a list of resources to accompany this webinar, and we'd like to highlight a few books from our list. So to start, these are both quite simple texts, but with powerful messages, appropriate for young learners, but depending on how you present them, they could be used up to secondary cycle 1, especially if you use the back material. Stand Up, Speak Up has a simple, repetitive language pattern and follows a little girl as she gets ready to attend a demonstration, and then takes things farther as she herself speaks up and takes action against climate change. The back material includes information about young people who have made a difference. I Didn't Stand Up is about bullying. In this book, students can see themselves and others who are different. It's a great message for anyone, for all ages. There is excellent background information that can take your discussion quite far. And the book was inspired by a poem that became popular after World War II called First They Came, that talks about how groups of people were mistreated and killed by the Nazis, most horrifically the Jewish people, and how most people at the time did not speak up to try to protect innocent victims. A copy of the poem is in the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington. So this book really gives you a lot to talk about, and there's great potential for follow-up. Another book from our list is The Sad Little Fact. And this looks like a book for young readers, but actually it's about how facts might be distorted, hidden, or denied. And it brings up issues like fake news. It's quite subtle. It's okay for Cycle 3 elementary students, but I would say even better for secondary students. And this would be a great choice to open up dialogue in the classroom. And now for some nonfiction. Pay It Forward presents stories of 14 young people and the amazing things they've done to make the world a better place. For example, Hannah Taylor established the Ladybug Foundation. She began helping the homeless at 8 years old and then expanded to other issues. She eventually did undergrad studies at McGill, and now she's in Manitoba studying to be a human rights lawyer. Frankie, formerly Janice Edroff, at the age of 7, began to fundraise for Variety, the children's charity. That's an organization that helps pay medical expenses for children with health-related challenges. Frankie was born with neurofibromatosis, and his family received help from this organization, so he wanted to pay back. And in 2018, he came out as transgender, and that's why he's now known as Frankie. Elena Podmorov, at age 9, founded a nonprofit organization, Little Women for Little Women in Afghanistan, to promote awareness and raise money for Afghan girls' right to education. This book was published in 2014, so the kids in the book have grown up quite a bit, but on our resource list, you'll find many links to similar inspirational stories that are more up to date and more current. And both the book list and the resource list present just a few ideas. There are many great resources available. Also on this page, Speaking Our Truth is a book with a lot of information explaining why reconciliation is so important and includes reconciliation messages, projects, and initiatives. Many ideas for what we can do in our schools, classrooms, and as individuals to work towards reconciliation. Probably the intended audience for both of these books is elementary cycle 3 and secondary cycle 1, but because they're nonfiction, you can definitely use them with older students and quite easily adapt them for younger children too. So here is our bibliography on this slide and on the next ones. and we'd like to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us at admin@literacytoday.ca.